those of you who don't know me, my name is Jamie Jurek. I have been involved with the San Diego chapter for about 7 years at this point in one way or another. I'm currently the chapter president. We do have a couple other board members who are on today. So thank you to them for participating as well. All right. So with that being said, I am going to go ahead and hand it off to Jimmy. Jimmy, I believe this is the third or fourth time I'm going to see you speak, and it's always such a pleasure. You always have so much great information. So we are, again, really thankful to have you joining us today. Give me a moment, and I am going to go ahead and pin you to the top here. There you go. Jimmy, can you hear us?
Yeah.
I can hear you now, Jimmy. You are all set. Right. If you want to go ahead and take it away.
Thank you all for having me. And I'd rather be in San Diego, tell you the truth, Ben. But here we are. So the title of this is Huntington's Disguise. Excuse me. And Huntington's Disguise is well known, I believe, to every family touched by Huntington's disease. Because if you think of, when you see old group family photographs from holidays or, let me set my timer here, hang on. I don't want to go on too long. If you look at old family group pictures, again, from the holidays, summer get-togethers, whatever, you'll often see one of your affected family members and say, geez, you can just tell that Uncle Joe is starting to get affected by just seeing the picture. What you're seeing is what I call Huntington's disguise. But to kind of give it a more conceptual thing before we go into the details that make it up, I think of this. You know the old, we're real high tech here, old pictures, old handheld pictures, but the comedy and tragedy masks that you can now buy in Home Goods and everywhere else as like decorative wall hangings and everything. Which started out, you know, in the ancient Greek theater. So the actors would wear them and change them within roles. And the people that were way back in these big amphitheater cheap seats could kind of tell what the emotion was in their face. In the intervening, you know, several hundred years since the classic Greek theater, they've come to represent the whole broad spectrum, breadth of human emotion. So happy, mad, glad, sad, the whole litany of emotions that one can wear on their face. One more of the problems that HD presents is that it adds a third face, which is this one. That certain features collide or come together to create this facial appearance. That's Huntington's disguise. Now, Huntington's disguise is really, if you think of all of the talks you've heard a lot of medical doc speakers give, they will often kind of think of or conceptualize HD as 3 categories of symptoms. They often refer to them as the triad or the trio of clinical disorders or symptoms. And they might be a little different depending on any one doc's conceptual thing or their training, but essentially they are the movement disorder and all the physical features, the real apparent ones, the easy to see ones. Then the mood disorder, again, primarily depression, some other things, but mood. And the third one are cognitive deficits. And at this point right out of the gate, I like to strike cognitive deficits and put it in more plain English and call it challenges in thinking. So movement and physical, mood and cognitive. Plain English, challenges in thinking. Huntington's disguise takes some of the features from column A, if you will, the physical and movement related ones, and column C, the challenges in thinking, puts them together, mixes them up, and you get Huntington's disguise. So that's what I want to talk about today, because as well as you know your family member, your loved one, it could be a spouse, partner, it could be your child, it could be your parent, it could be your brother or sister, whatever in the family constellation the relationship is, you know them well, you know them intimately, you're an expert on reading their facial expressions. But Huntington's disguise is so subtle, it can often fool you too. So what I want to do here is look at some of the features from column A, if you will, the movement stuff, some from column C, the challenge in thinking, and break them down into their elements so that it'll be easier for two things. Number one is for you to see through the disguise, or if you have HD, to cope with the disguise. There's some coping strategies. But for you to see through it and not be fooled by somebody who may otherwise appear to be sad or angry when inside they're not. So to see through it, but also, and this is probably in my kind of personal agenda, it's to help you explain it to others, whether they're people that they encounter in your loved ones encounter in day-to-day life, like the guy at the gas station, the convenience store, or to grandchildren or kids, stuff like that. So to really break the disguise down into its elements so that it just makes it easy to see through it, to identify the contributing factors. So anyway, that's the background. So first, we're gonna go through item by item on a handful of them, the movement and physical features, and then we'll do some of the cognitive stuff. So we begin with the physical features. The first one is just this, and again, it's real easy to do this in person. It's real difficult to do it with screens, two-dimensional screens, some of the subtleties of facial appearance, but we're gonna give it a shot. So the first one is just this general, face at rest. Not happy, not just at rest. If you did it for a while and practiced it a bit, you could get good and really relax the muscles of your face over time. So I'm really showing no emotion here. I'm just trying to get my face flat like this. This is often heightened by folks at various places along their HD road. Not everybody has this all the time, and there are many, many things that contribute to just this. And some of them are frankly, they're like more in the bailiwick of physicians, of neurologists, physical therapists, and people with much higher training than mine. But a couple of the contributing factors to this, in my time, have been one gentleman who had just a dystonia that they thought was in his face. We'll come to dystonia later in a number of other contexts. But just a change in muscle tone. Another one was a woman who had generalized weakness in her face. And again, there are others. So the etiology, the cause of it is varied, but it still contributes to this, face at rest. You'll often hear in psychiatry, for example, like people have a bland affect or neutral or whatever. So that's element number one. Element number two is this whole notion of motor impersistence. Now, motor impersistence. Now, some people are familiar with this term, but usually most people aren't. Or it's listed in a bunch of signs of HD that maybe you don't pay as much attention to. And some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today is grossly oversimplified to make these points. So there's way more to motor impersistence than what I'm talking about. So yes, I'm admitting up front I'm oversimplifying it, but they will make the point, and they are clinically accurate. So motor impersistence, it is said that as I'm speaking to you, I'm holding this cup and my brain is doing the work for you. I'm not consciously saying, Jimmy, keep that grasp on that cup while you're talking to these people. It's doing the work for me. I don't have to think about it unconsciously. If I didn't have the ability to maintain those contractions in my fingers and thumb and whatever else is involved in it, if I couldn't do those unconsciously at the same time, I would drop the cup. So it's said that those contractions in my fingers and hands, like it is now, are said to persist. If they didn't persist and I dropped it, it's said that they impersist. Hence the notion of motor impersistence. When neurologists learn this, and you can Google this, it'll pop right up, they use the analogy of milkmaid's grasp and then release in milking a cow. So that's generally the notion of motor impersistence. Now, again, it's clinically impossible to diagnose some of these things, certainly retroactively, and certainly that you're not seeing people. But I'm going to tell you a story that I got from HD, listening to families touched by Huntington's disease. And as I've retold the story, you'll just start seeing the heads nod, or people will look to one another. And it's this. Let's say you are a kid, and I don't know how old you are, 6, 7, 8, but you're in the age range where everything is more vivid, where, as we say in my neck of the woods, this is a bad analogy for you guys, but the age where everything's more vivid, where the snow is deeper or the summer is longer. So you're a kid and your parent is driving, still working, they're driving a car and you're in the back seat. And you're going down a nice stretch of interstate highway where to maintain a nice, slow, steady speed, your ankle is depressed on the gas pedal. And like so, just if I'm not describing this right. You got steady speed, that angle here, those muscle contractures to keep your ankle down, steady speed. If you have motor impersistence, again, this is early in people's people's HD road, slowly, not dramatically, but all at once, slowly, it'll back off the gas pedal like this. Oops, I did it backwards. So there it is, depressed, and I can't tell him, man, but you know what I mean. So there it is, depressed, and here it is, starting to back off. Until you realize that you're slowing down. Again, not dramatically. Maybe you go from 65 to 55, and the driver says, oh, bring it back up to speed. And then over time, a couple minutes, who knows how long, slowly backs off. They realize it again, they bring it up to speed. If you're the kid in the back seat in those years where everything's more vivid, you may remember it or feel like, gee, driving with mom or dad felt like, whoa, kind of thing, because you would notice it. Now, again, it's impossible to think of this, and I say that, but enough families just know that example dramatically. So we can kind of presume or give a fair guess that it's related to this whole notion of motor impersistence. What does this have to do with the disguise, though? The disguise, in terms of the disguise, and the reason we talk about this is when we speak to one another, obviously, nice, good eye contact is important. So I'm trying to look straight into the camera now. It's kind of a fundamental, signal that we're paying attention to one another. But there's more to it than that. That when you start to engage with people in a conversation, whether it's with your loved one or with some guy at the convenience store, when you're buying gas, whatever, and you start to speak to them, there's another set of signals. And maybe you've never thought of this. I hadn't until somebody explained it to me. There's another bunch of signals, and it's like when you look at somebody, and again, if we were in person, I would be right in the front row and turn and start speaking to somebody and would have been making eye contact with them already. But as soon as I looked at them, these little muscles in the forehead and around the eyes, they kind of, again, I can't do it subtly, but there's a brightening. The only word, I can't find a clinical word. I've asked many people, all I can get is a lot of neurologists say, I don't know, man. It's like definitely related to the cranial nerves probably or whatever. But it's this kind of like, whatever. Again, hard to do, but it's more than just eye contact. And eye contact with the kind of, it's when somebody speaks to you beyond eye contact, there's this more brightening thing, which you maintain as you're speaking to somebody. If you have motor impersistence and you have that brightening, it will be there and you'll start probably, but it won't take long till you go back to that flat thing. So even that signal is diminished based on that contribution of that brightening kind of thing in conversations. So let's go back to the old photo of Uncle Joe. So, and think of this, you gather everybody up for whatever it is, your cookout, and you say, come on, man, everybody get in there. Da, 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 da. Okay, everybody ready? Everybody smile. And there's everybody smiling, including Uncle Joe. And, well, we have cell phone cameras, so it's quicker now. But in the old days, when you had to wait for that little orange light, well, wait a minute, hold on, everybody stay there. Uncle Joe, like everybody else, started out. But by the time, okay, Uncle Joe goes like this, click, you've got the picture. 20 years later, you're saying, there's Uncle Joe, you can tell he's starting to get affected. So that's motor impersistence's subtle contribution to this whole notion of a disguise. The next kind of contributing thing is this whole notion of posture. So let's just go back to dystonia. Now, again, I'm going to totally oversimplify dystonia. Dystonia, in many ways, to many people along their HD road, is way more, not everybody, no blanket statements, it's HD, affects people in far greater ways. You look at the whole course of their HD road in ways that may be more disabling or problematic than even chorea. But dystonia is a disorder of muscle tone, or a dis of tone, or dystonia. Maybe your muscle tone, and again, hold on. Got an elastic here in my drawer. PTs will always describe it as muscle tone. If you have too much tone, you'll be rigid, and if you have too little tone, you'll be floppy. So it's just the right amount of muscle tone. Dystonia affects people one way. In terms of the disguise, it contributes it contributes as posture. So there's no typical postural thing that HD brings people. You could be, one side of your trunk could be tight and the other side loose, and you may lean to one side or the other. Some people will, I can't do this, but I'm going to try and stand up here. Forget it. But as they stand, they may be walking on their toes, upright. And when adults walk on their toes, it always looks like they're going to crash into things. In this case, they usually don't crash. thank God, but they're up on their toes. Other people may be lean back on their heels and have this kind of posture. More commonly, though, people may have a twist in their trunk because of that. There's no typical posture. It could be anything. But what this has to do, this changes in posture, is this. So if you again are just having a regular encounter with me, if I'm somebody who you're going to pay at the gas station, let's say, and you approach me and you're looking at me and I seem like a pleasant person and all of that, and here's what you see physically and facially. If this is what you get, again, flat at rest, you see me and you're sizing me up, you're anticipating what this interaction is going to be like, or is it going to be okay, kind of thing. I can change how you size it up by just changing my posture a little bit, like lowering one of my shoulders. So instead of this, you approach me and you get this. Now, I haven't changed my face. This. Now, I don't know what it's like in Southern California, but when we see this here in Massachusetts, man, we get, we think, attitude. But people's posture conveys messages to you. So now as you start adding these, layering these little subtle things, one on top of the other, you start getting this, and the disguise starts to emerge. And on top of posture, now sometimes, I didn't include this one for a long time, but this feature I'm about to talk about, because it was too subtle, but then I added it because as kind of a memory device for me to make the point of how subtle these things are about the disguise. There's no one big contributor. It's just a whole bunch of subtle things. And one of them is that a lot of times people's postures, their shoulders will come in a little bit, just a little bit. This happens a lot. I'm 68 years old and I've already got this. So when I go to the doctors and they want to measure my height for my annual thing, because we old people shrink, you know, and the nurse will say, okay, stand against the wall. And I'll stand against the wall. And then she'll come up to me and with the measuring thing and push me back a little so that I'm touching the wall on my shoulders. Because otherwise I'm in a little, because my shoulders are curling in just a tiny, tiny bit. That's the point. It's real subtle. But I pointed out in terms of the disguise, because sometimes when your shoulders curl in just a little bit, and again, it's hard to show on the screen, but I'm not talking about dramatically like this or like this back. Just they curl in just a little bit. It's one more real subtle contribution to making good eye contact, because when your shoulders curl in just a tiny bit, your head naturally comes down a little. Again, not this, but you'll notice that when you curl your shoulders in, your head tends to come down. So when you get it, to whatever degree, you're not looking straight on, you just tend to, your eyes are a little bit lower. Usually then I would be just to the point of like maybe raising your eyeglasses so you can, the top of the frames don't obscure the people in front of you. But even that is just a subtle kind of thing, so that you might get then this, you know, with another, or this, that kind of stuff. So just another real subtle one that adds to the layering. The next two have to demonstrate here. Got about 1.5 feet this way, 2 feet that way, a couple inches in the back, but we're going to give it a shot. So I want to talk about two notions at the same time. The first one is balance. So most people have impaired balance as they walk their HD road. And where does and which is why people fall. A lot of people feel like are under the misconception that most falls are caused by chorea, when in fact most falls are caused by impaired balance. So where does impaired balance first manifest itself? And the answer is it's usually when you stand, and again, to turn. So as I know you can't see me well here, but here's my chair. Right now, as I'm turning to sit, right, take a step, balance on this one foot, and then go down. So just that millisecond, that fleeting moment, I'm on one foot as I turn to sit in the chair. That's why most falls in the enormous Medicaid database that nursing homes have to report to are most often bedside, toilet next to getting on and off the toilet, and sitting and standing in chairs. It's because that millisecond turn is where people balance themselves on one foot. So just think of that impaired balance. Hold that thought, and that's where it is. Another one that's not really a movement or physical thing, it's more of a sensory thing, is this whole notion of depth perception. Now, not everybody has this. Again, like everything, it's HD. There's almost no universal manifestations other than the general direction and a couple of things. But the subtle ones are not universal typically, and it's hard to describe. But some people have difficulty with depth perception. A lot of times, some underlined, some families will talk about their loved one tripping up the stairs. So not crashing down with injury and stuff, falling down the stairs, but just where tripping up the stairs, meaning when you lift your foot, so here's the riser on the stair, and here's the tread. When you lift your foot, you might, if you miss it, you just miss the stair, maybe go forward a little. If you overestimate it unconsciously, as you go up the first couple of stairs and go in too far, your foot will hit the back of the riser. And then too, it has that appearance of going forward, and hence the term falling up the stairs. Not usually with any injury or whatever. People just brush themselves off and get their balance and be more careful, whatever. But that depth perception affects people subtly a lot. Not something we talk about a lot because it's not everybody, and it's not the entire, it's not present the entire course of folks HD. So back to the chair. So you've seen me at least once get up and down out of the chair now. And get back in it. So now we are gonna try here a little bit more. So here's the chair, and as I approach this chair, and I am going to sit in it like this, as I approach the chair, my brain is unconsciously doing the work for me, judging the distance to the chair from where I'm going to make my turn, okay? If I make my turn, if I get too close and misjudge it by overestimating how close I'm to the chair. If I get too close to the chair, then I'm just going to hit the chair and go like that. If, on the other hand, I misjudge it on the other side and I make my turn too early, then I would fall down, boom, on the floor. Figure they out how they fall. So, judging just the right distance is critical. So now let's take the impaired balance on one foot and add a little bit of misjudgment on distance from the chair. So we're gonna go too far from the chair, put the two together, and it might look like this. Here's that fleeting moment of impaired balance, judge it too far, and you flop into the chair. So I would ask, have you ever seen anybody with HD flop into a chair? if I was speaking to you now in person, I know that heads would start nodding. People would start looking at whoever they came with. Now, we can't, I got to give you the disclaimer again, because we want to keep integrity on this. We can't retrospectively look at this and universally say that that's what causes flopping into chairs. But it happens often enough, and those features are present enough in many people to kind of say, often that's what it is. As somebody who's worked in management of care facilities, 2 nursing homes, a state hospital, and an assisted living facility, a lot of times people would say, what's the most important thing if I wanted to start a unit to take care of people with HD that I should pay attention to? A lot of people, you'll hear, this is a common one, well, have to round the edges on the tables because people will fall. We don't want them splitting their head open. And I've never done that. What I've learned is whatever the flange that connects the toilet to the floor is heavy duty as you can get it. Because from flopping onto toilets, when you start to congregate a number of people in care settings who flop onto toilets, it destroys that flange. The tank of the back of the toilet has to be secured to the wall. Sometimes they're like an inch out. Those things are dramatic evidence of just how many people have this kind of flopping thing. The toilet, the enamel nature of the toilet just is really good evidence of it, more so than a bed or a chair. So what does flopping into chairs have to do with the disguise? So here's Uncle Joe again, and here's Uncle Joe, and he is at the convenience store, gas station, Quickie Mart, whatever they're in Southern California, and is it QT? I don't know. Anyway, and you say, Joe, I haven't seen you in 20 years, man. Sit down. Let's have a cup of coffee. And he's getting this already. And Joe says, yeah, I really like that. Sit down, Joe. And he gets the facial thing, and then he gets this. Again, more evidence emerging of that person is reasonably starting to think, maybe Joe's not as excited to see me as I am him, or something like that. Or, gee, I wasn't that friendly with Joe in high school, wasn't in my clique, who knows? But again, it's just that evidence of where you can start making reasonable assumptions that maybe he's disinterested in this thing, or he's not paying attention. I mean, it could be a number of things. We're going to get to those later. But first, check the time. Okay. So the flopping thing contributes to that kind of disguise, if you will. Now we're adding another one. This whole notion of modulating people's force of movement, meaning finding the middle ground. It's like Goldilocks. Not too hot, not too cold, just right in our movement. So you see me now stand up up and down on the chair a couple of times, excuse me. And when I didn't, again, brain doing the work for me unconsciously. And if I didn't use enough force in the muscles of my calves and thighs and whatever else trunk is involved in it, in standing, if I didn't use enough force, if I used too little force, I couldn't lift my weight up against gravity. If I use too much force, it has this notion of leaping out of a chair. People have difficulty finding that middle ground. More simple example is back to the cup. So I have motor persistence, so I'm maintaining my grasp on the cup. In terms of the dimension of the force in those contractions. If I don't have enough force, as I'm talking to you, especially doing two or multiple things at the same time, then I drop the cup. I'm sorry, yeah, because I don't have enough force. And if I have too much force, then I squish the cup. So it's just find the right amount of force. The other example is this. And this is a fun thing of when we do this in person. I'll pick somebody, somebody will volunteer out of the crowd, and I will say, okay, you are a cooperative nursing home resident, and I'm here as a certified nursing assistant to help you shower tonight. So, okay, I'm gonna help you take a shower, etc. Okay, let me lather up under your arm, in your armpit. As soon as I say that, stand into somebody who's never met me before, tell him what the thing is, and approach him to lather up his arm. Instinctively, reflexively almost, he just kind of raises his arm, like that, to help me. He's helping me help him, kind of thing. And certainly not thinking consciously of how much force to use to raise his arm. If he doesn't use it, if his brain doesn't have him use enough force, like me getting out of the chair, he can't lift his arm against gravity. Can't lift it up. If he uses too much force, then as willing and instinctively as he wants to help me, what we get is this. And if you're unwise and you're on the receiving end of that, you go up to your colleague and say, hey, if you're taking care of Pollard tonight, take somebody with you. He just clubbed me, he just hit me, or whatever. Now, I'm not saying, this is an important point here. Excuse me again. I'm not saying everybody who ever gets clubbed, certainly in long-term care settings, by residents, that's the reason. Because it's not. And you wouldn't believe me if it was anyway, but it's not. But it's important to know that sometimes it is. And if I had an audience of people who've been long-term care employees with large groups of folks with HD in those settings, they would know what I'm talking about, because they would have got to know by now a lot of their residents enough to know that typically it's like this, but every once in a while, as willing as they want to help out, they're going to get this. If a new staff doesn't know that, they will mistake it clearly for that. But I'm not saying that's always the reason, but I am always make sure to use that example as the movement disorder, not all of HD, but it's true of all of HD. As well as you know somebody, as many times as you've done something to assist them, there can be more to what's going on than meets the eye. So that most people never think of that modulating force of movement, even though they've cared for them for years, let's say. But it's important that you know that that happened. So one more thing. Let's say, here's a cartoon I got. Let's say you are sitting here or you're at your computer and somebody walks by and says, and it's getting chilly, and you say, hey, could you shut the door on the way out for me? And they go, whoops. I lost me on the, there we go. So you say, hey, just shut the door on the way out for me. And they go, reach their hand out as they're going out just to shut the door. If they have too little force, then the door doesn't shut and you keep doing what you're doing and probably think, yeah, what the hell, you know, no big deal. If when they go to shut the door, they use too much force, then the door slams. Just a little cartoon. Well, for goodness sake, you know, because slamming of doors is like an international, I would assume, thing of, oh, what's wrong with that guy? What did I do, you know, of anger or whatever. But especially at extension like that, if you're vulnerable to it even more. What does this have to do back to the disguise, though? What it has to do with the disguise is voice. So that a lot of times people will, when they can't modulate their force of the diaphragm and other things, may speak like really quietly. They can still have all the same affect and interest and everything, but their voice just isn't that loud. Or if they have too much force, their brain doing the work for them, not consciously, then, and I give you a shout alert here, don't want to scare you, but that you can say, hey, Joe, I haven't seen you, man. You want to have a cup of coffee? Sure, I'd love to, on the far end of it. When in fact, we have a nice kind of conversational volume, you know, so it's a little too much or a little too low. But when you hear somebody speak with low force, low volume, sure, I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you, or I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you, kind of thing. Another contributor to just that layering of all the things that can give other signals. So that's just some. To end the first part of the movement, physical, and sensory contributors to Huntington's disguise, there's more. These, I might add, are just easier to explain to people. It's why I selected some of them. But they're all there and they're present. Again, they're not present through everybody's HD road, but they do come and go, and they're typical in many ways. So that's like column A. Column C, back to the challenges in thinking. I just want to cover a couple of them here as we wind down. The first one, and probably the one that I always think, just generally in terms of helping folks live with HD, is this whole notion of delayed processing and delays in interactions. And I probably mentioned this when I was in San Diego that time, but it's this whole notion of setting the ticker back. So basically, fewer neurons. So again, challenges in thinking now here. So fewer neurons, or certainly far fewer neurons firingly efficient, delays all kinds of cognitive or mental or whatever thinking challenges. Everything kind of slows down. It's slower. Alert, not necessarily slow, but progressively, imperceptibly, day-to-day slower, but it does slow down. I think most often that shows up in interactions between us. And I always think of a cartoon as a reminder of this. If there's ever a cartoon, now cartoons, I mean animated cartoons, Warner Brothers and Disney, and if there's the cartoon has a scene in it where there's like a tennis match or a ping pong match or whatever, they'll always show two people in the audience whose heads are just going boom, 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 watching the game, that ball going back and forth. I think of that to remind me that there is a natural back and forth rhythm in all of our conversations and interactions. So the ones at the convenience store are probably more rapid. How you doing? Great. You know, it's gonna rain today. Oh, good. What do I owe you? Here you go. Bum, bum, bum. Maybe if you come home from work with whoever you live with, the back and forth might be more substantive. That what you're talking about, it might be a lot longer chunk, but then you have a response chunk, and then they have a response back, but it's slower. If one of the people of the two in the interaction has a processing delay, it slows it down just a little bit. So if you're the one without the processing delay and you say, hey, how you doing, man? If you have the processing delay, you might have to wait a little bit for them to say, hey, how you doing, man? Good, just a little bit. if you say to them, so where are you? Let's say it's Joe and you haven't seen him in a long time. Joe, what are you doing for work? Hold it. Joe, what are you doing for work now? Glad there's wheels in this chair. Joe, what are you doing for work now? I'm a mechanic. In that little wait for him to respond, you start to think, what's going on here, etc. You lose that natural back and forth rhythm. Which brings me to my personal, not for you guys, but how I kind of had my aha moment with processing delays was, so I tell this story a lot. It's with this guy named Tony. I know we're running out of time here, so with this guy named Tony, who I was at, and it worked in an assisted living thing. Tony was well along his HD road, and we were having this conversation on a quiet night. I know you San Diegans will love to know that the home was snowed in that night on a blizzard. So it was quiet, and the night shift couldn't get in, so it was the evening shift. And just a quiet night in the home, and everybody was way more attentive to each other in terms of talking to one another, the residents and staff. I get talking to Tony. Tony starts telling me about his family, particularly about his daughter, whose name is Andrea. And the content was the same stuff that people talk about when they talk about their families. How old is Andrea? Oh, how many kids you got? How many boys? How many girls? Excuse me. Just that kind of stuff. How old is she? Is she in high school, college, blah, blah, blah. So this conversation elapsed, might have been 12, 15 minutes. Even though the content of it was warm and typical, I could tell at the same time, though, both of these things were coexisted. As warm as the interaction was, Tony was maintaining it, not me. I wasn't driving this. At the same time, I could tell I was also irritating him at certain moments. Some of what irritated him was clearly easy to figure out. There were those like rapid succession, 3 of these instances where 2 people begin to talk at precisely the same moment. Only usually somebody will just go, no, go ahead, and then they continue and nothing's thought of it. I did that to him like 3 times right in a row, to the point where I had to say that I said to him, Tony, I'm really sorry. I keep stepping on your words, man. And he goes on. And then a couple more minutes will go by and I would do something similar. I could tell the conversation's warm and he's asking me about my family and blah, 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 blah. But every once in a while, I'm irritating him. Finally, I say something. Tony clenches his fist together and says, don't set my ticker back. Now, at the time, I didn't understand the words. A nearby nurse aide did. And she said, I think he said, don't set my ticker back. Which now I've come to know is this. I'm one of these people, and I know some of you are just like me, and some of you, God bless you, aren't. Those of us who have difficulty with silence in conversations, that if there's a silence in conversation, I speak for myself, you gotta fill it with words, man. Do the words have to be related to anything that we were talking about before? No, they're just filler for whatever reason. I drive people crazy who speak contemplatively and think about what they're saying. So what was happening was I can't keep it zipped. So when I would ask Tony, what's your daughter's name? If I could, Tony, what's your daughter's name? Andrea. But he had me. He not only had HD, he had me. So what he was getting was, Tony, what's your daughter's name? How old is she? How many kids you got? How old is she? High school or college? Do I know her? Does she visit often? Et cetera, et cetera. And all Tony wants to do is get to Andrea. So that's what he meant. Don't set the ticker back. Every time took him out of his game as he was processing this. In terms of awareness, he knew exactly what he wanted to say. It just took them a little longer to say it. So it's really hard not to do that. Really hard. Trust me, I'm one of them. But that delay contributes also to the disguise. I also will point out that, I'm going to wrap this up quickly, point out that it takes almost no time, not much of a delay at all, for us to, in between ourselves interactions, start to wonder what's going on. Like if I say something to my wife or any family member who I know intimately, if they delay their response to me just a little bit, tiny bit, I'll say something like, everything okay? Yeah, everything's okay. What do you want to do today? Go shopping. Just subtle little things. And I know, uh-oh, what did I do? Or even more so, uh-oh, what didn't I do that I should have done? Because that little delay is communicating stuff. It's the frost. I'm getting the frost. So the point is, now let's put that delayed processing back into the disguise, back into Uncle Joe, bumping into somebody at the Quickie Mart, and he says, "Joe, how you doing? Let's sit down and have a cup of coffee. I haven't seen you since high school." And he gets this and flops into the chair, and he says, "So Joe, what are you doing for work now?" In this arc, first of all, he might keep asking questions like I did, which just irritates Joe. But also, just that processing delay in that arc, he's starting to figure what's wrong with Joe, what's going on here, and maybe there's some false beliefs, like he's bored, he's disinterested, he only cared about himself. I mean, you can make it up. He's angry. He never liked me anyway. You can find that stuff, but they're wrong. Joe is probably just as excited to hear and be with, to bump into his buddy and talk. But all the signs layered of HD, subtle signs layered one on top of another, come together to give this impression that can be easily mistaken by people who know us the best. So we know that no matter what people say, no matter what no matter what disability you face in life, you'll hear people complain or bemoan or regret that friends fall aside, friends fall off. So I think it's important to teach people exactly what this is, that these kind of things can be misleading, and hopefully we can maintain those things longer. If you're in a nursing home and a new nurse aide comes in and she's new to the job and you're glad to see this young kid full of energy and whatever, and what she encounters is, "Hi, how are you tonight?" kind of thing. And she may very well go to a college and say, "Mr. Pollard doesn't seem to like me very much," or whatever. And in terms of the old expression, first impressions are lasting, I would say first misimpressions maybe even lasting longer. So it's really important to see through the disguise, again, to teach people, but to even, as well as we know the person that you love, to better understand them. There's no cure for HD yet, but we can treat it with understanding, and some of it is as simple as this. Now let me check my notes because I'm done. I think I covered the key points. I did, but there's just one little thing unique to you guys. So when I used to travel around and talk about things, I would have swag made to bring to the meeting to give out. So I had this, thinking that I would be with you in San Diego, I had these made. I took the Padres swinging Friar logo and just added a little Cure HD. So this is no swastika in this one, by the way, but like the new redesigned hat was. So I have these little magnets that I was going to give you all of the Swing and Fryer with the Cure HD thing. So if you, here's my email address, jjpollard@comcast.net. If you just shoot me an email or Facebook instant message me at Jimmy Pollard, I'd love to stick an envelope, magnet envelope and send it your way. That's all I got to say. I'm glad that you've listened, and I've thrown the program off a little by going off too long. Thank you, Jamie, for having me, and everybody for showing up. I'm out of here.
Thank you, Jimmy. We appreciate you so much.
My pleasure.
You did a great job, as always, kind of breaking down all those aspects of HD. And for the group, I'll make sure to share your email address.
Oh, cool.
So that we can send off for those magnets. That is a great idea. Thank you so much.
Tell Tim Schroeder, I've already sent, I had his address from other stuff. Knowing he's a baseball fan, they're already in the mail.
I'm sure he'll love that.
Awesome.
So before we let you go, we have a couple minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions for you, I'm going to go ahead. If you want to unmute yourself, we have a smaller group, so feel free to ask a question if you have one.
I always have a question, or maybe more of a comment. So when my dad was sick, and my mom can back me up on this, I was livid because our uncle, who used to be friends with him, would never come to visit him anymore. And you were talking about the friends falling off and the facial expressions and all that. And it's somehow like you can't explain it enough to people to get them to understand that that person is still inside there and they need you to come and say hello to them. And instead of me being able to express that, I just got angry and shut down. And and to this day, I still am mad at my uncle. I don't even want to see him because of it, you know. And I obviously Tim has Huntington's disease. My brother Ron was diagnosed last year with it. I introduced him to some friends of mine last year, and one of the things they said to me is, he's not very social, is he? And I'm like, yeah, he is actually very social, you know. And I was so confused by the comment. And I guess the question is, how do I get people to see my family the way I see them, you know, so that they don't ignore them?
I don't know, Mindy. I don't know. You're just keeping at it. I don't know. I don't know any more. I have no more tips for you than you've already encountered firsthand. But I will say two comments. Number one is that we talk about awareness. Here we are in awareness, at the tail end of Awareness Month. If we look at public awareness, I think it's really important to ask ourselves, what do we want to teach the general public? And number one, is it, you know, gee, it's been said to look like Alzheimer's. Well, you know, what does the general public know about that? That those poor souls lose their total fund of information. You know, I think we need to just do collectively, because that thing, and I'm not zeroing in on that, but worldwide, we got to do a better job of describing HD so that when people hear about it, whatever they take from it contributes to avoiding that heartbreaking problem that you're talking about. And that what we tell people, like the guy at Quickie Mart, what he needs to know in your one, so people have these nutshell descriptions that you all have. I would ask, how many times have you all explained Huntington's disease to people in your world? Answer, bazillions. Whether it's your coworkers at every job you worked at, or your friends, or your kids' friends, or it's thousands. What do you tell them in that? Like, you probably got the 10-second drill that just flows from your mouth, and then the 30-second drill that's for a little longer situations, different things. What goes in there? Is it really important, for example, to tell the guy at Quickie Mart that each and every child has a 50% chance of getting it? Maybe it's more important to tell people some of the stuff in the disguise. Like, he might look a little delayed. It might take him a bit longer to get back to you. He has this thing that contributes to him kind of looking maybe sad or angry. Maybe we should be taking more of that and putting those in those nutshell descriptions. I'm not prescribing what should go in your nutshell description. I'm just saying, as a rule, I think some of the stuff we pass on to people needs to be more focused on how they're going to encounter it, so you don't lose uncles along the way. Anyway, that's all I would say. But I think, again, the biggest awareness opportunity is collectively that bazillions of times people directly affected tell others in their lives, their immediate lives, not the general public out there, what HD is. And I think a little more of it should include the things that they're going to that are going to serve as fodder for misperceptions about how people's mood, or how intelligent they are, or how sick they are, or that kind of thing. That's my soapbox to answer your question, but I really have no tips other than it hurts. And I understand why you're angry, man, at your uncle. And, you know, I don't think you're very different than a lot of other people on that end.
Yeah, Jimmy, I think it sounds like kind of what you're saying is it's really about education and then encouragement, and kind of breaking it down like that for people to make it a little bit easier. Is that a good summary?
Yeah. And see, when I think of awareness and what we need to teach that uncle, Mindy's uncle example, as a teacher, I think, I started as a special ed teacher. This is a curriculum issue. So it's like, what do we want to teach people? And that is a huge, huge thing. We got to really think about that. It's not marketing. It's not branding. It's education. There's a place for that. I'm not putting that down. But when we need to teach our extended network of people beyond family what this is, it's real serious about what we all should be talking about. And one more thing, I see Brother Tim in the back. We'll show him the logo. Tim, these are on the way. Anyway.
I have a question. Can I get a copy of your mask image? Because I always do, like, let's talk about HD in May.
Yeah, sure.
I can totally do that.
Yeah, send me an email and I'll just send you the image.
jjpollard@comcast.com?
Comcast.net.
Oh, Comcast.net, okay.
Anyway, that's.
All right, Jimmy, thank you so much. And if you have any more questions, like I said, I'll be sharing that email address, and I'm sure it's okay if people reach out to you directly as well. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. We'll go ahead and move on to our next speaker. So give me one moment, Shannon. I'm going to go ahead and pin you to the top now.
Okay.
All right. So our next speaker is Shannon O'Neill Jones, San Diego's own. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited to have you share some really great information with us. So Shannon, I know you have slides.
Yes.
So did you want to go ahead and share your screen with us? And
okay, I'll do that right now. Okay, and then I'm just gonna open this up, play from start. Okay, can everybody see that PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So as Jamie said, my name is Shannon O'Neill Jones. I am an attorney here in San Diego. I specialize in estate planning, probate, conservatorships, anything that you'll find in the probate court. HDSA is very special to me because I come from a Huntington's disease family. My mom was diagnosed when I was 15, and she passed away about 5 years ago. And I am actually at risk. I have not been tested yet. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started on my slides. So I'm going to break this down into estate planning for individuals with HD, and then estate planning for families with HD. Within the estate planning for individuals with HD, It's really going to depend on whether the person has capacity or not. And I'll go over that a little bit more in detail in a little bit. But if they have capacity to sign legal documents, we're going to look at creating advanced healthcare directives, financial powers of attorney, and trusts for those individuals. And then also having them add a family member or a friend, a responsible party as a designated payee on any disability benefits that they may have. I'm also going to talk about an advanced directive for receiving oral foods and fluids in the event of dementia, which is a supplement to the usual advanced healthcare directive that you'll see. And then finally, I'm going to show you guys where to find some free forms online. And then if the person does not have the legal capacity to sign legal documents, we'll talk about conservatorships. And then for families, it's really going to focus on special needs trusts. So making sure that our loved ones with HD are taken care of and they don't lose their government benefits as a result of any money that they're receiving from loved ones. Okay, so when we think about capacity, the definition can vary depending on what we're talking about, but usually when a client comes into my office and they want to create estate planning documents, the first thing I have to ask myself is, does this person have the legal capacity to understand and sign these legal documents? So they have to be able to understand the nature and effect of the document that they're signing. Otherwise, we can't have them signing stuff. So usually I would make that initial determination. There are certain situations where I'll request a doctor's note, just confirming that they have capacity, just to make sure that we're doing the right thing. I'm sure a lot of with different diseases, with Huntington's disease, with Alzheimer's, anything with dementia, people can have good and bad days. So there might be a day where it seems like they have the capacity and it seems like they understand, and then even a few hours go by and maybe that changes. So that's the first thing that I am going to look at. Capacity varies depending on what documents you're signing. So for example, the capacity to enter into a contract is a lot higher than the testamentary capacity that you need to sign a will and a trust. So for purposes of this presentation, I'm mostly focusing on that lower testamentary capacity. Okay. So advanced healthcare directives. Advanced healthcare directives are legal documents that will allow an individual to name a person to make healthcare decisions for them if they are unable to. This document will also allow them to discuss their wishes. So there's a section on the advanced healthcare directive that talks about end-of-life decisions, and then also organ donation preferences. So it's really important if somebody has capacity, if you're in the earlier stages of HD, and it's really important to get these documents done ahead of time. Also, financial powers of attorney. So this allows somebody to name an individual that can access their bank accounts, pay bills on their behalf, deal with Social Security and deal with different government benefits. Because if you have somebody that tries to call Social Security on your behalf, they're not going to speak with them unless you actually provide that financial power of attorney to them. So that's really important. And I just wanted to make a note for this slide, just in case there are people that live in different states. These forms are state specific, so there actually is a California statutory form. It's based on the California probate code. So we want to make sure if you live in California, you've got the California form. If you move to another state, it's important to get those updated to that state's form. Okay, so trusts are another tool that we use. All of these documents kind of work together to make sure that individuals are protected. So if an individual with HD does have capacity, having a trust can be very beneficial. So most people, when they think about wills and trusts, you think about what happens when I die, where are my assets going to go, who's going to make sure that everything is distributed to my children or to my loved ones. But trusts are actually really great tools to have to protect you during your lifetime. So if someone has a disability, or, you know, let's say you become incapacitated and you have dementia, or if you end up in the hospital in a coma or something like that, your successor trustee who's named in your trust can actually step in while you're still alive and manage all of your assets for you. So when you create a trust, you would name that individual in the actual trust document. And then you would also go to whatever bank or financial institution that you use, and you would set up a trust account. So that's going to be a bank account that's titled in the name of your trust. So that way, if something happens to you, it's really easy for that successor trustee to walk into the bank with a copy of your trust and have access to those accounts. So usually the way that that happens is they would have to provide, you know, some trusts will say one doctor's note, some will say 2 doctor's note, just confirming that you actually are incapacitated and you do not have the ability to manage your finances and care for yourself. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is kind of a unique document. This is so an advanced directive for receiving oral foods and fluids in the event of dementia. Not all estate planning attorneys use this, but I like to, just because of my personal relationship with Huntington's disease. So what this document does is it actually will allow somebody to express their wishes regarding oral feeding of foods and fluids in the event that they have an advanced dementing disease. They're unable to make informed decisions about their health care, and they're unable to feed themselves. So the document basically asks you certain questions if you would want to continue to receive food in that sort of situation. So this is where you can find the California Statutory Form Advanced Healthcare Directive. So I know, especially for people that have Huntington's disease and the advanced stages, they may not be able to work. I know that oftentimes money and resources are a concern. So there are options, though. There are free documents. So this is from the Office of the Attorney General. So you can, I can put that link maybe after my talk in the chat too, so it's easier for you guys to access that. But that's a free form. Oftentimes people's healthcare providers will have free advanced healthcare directives as well. So for example, I know Kaiser and Sharp, they have their own forms that you can fill out and submit with them, just to make sure that you've got somebody named to make those healthcare decisions for you if you are unable to. And if you are going to fill out this form, just make sure that it's signed by 2 witnesses that are not named in the document or notarized. And at the end of this slide, I provide all my contact info. So if this is something that people are wanting to do, you can feel free to reach out to me, and I can walk you through it as well. Okay, so if the individual lacks the capacity to sign legal documents, the only real option is through a conservatorship proceeding. So one of the reasons that I stress people getting their documents done as soon as possible ahead of time is because conservatorships they're very long proceedings, and they're also very expensive. So in order to file a petition for conservatorship in San Diego Superior Court, the filing fee alone is $435. Now you can try and get a fee waiver. That's always an option, but just the court costs alone can be very expensive. And then if you hire an attorney to represent you, that's added cost as well. But a conservatorship is a court proceeding where a judge appoints an individual known as a conservator to care for another person that is unable to care for themselves and handle their finances. And that person is called the conservatee. So there's 2 types of conservatorships, conservatorship of the person and conservatorship of the estate. Sometimes you can either get one of those, or you can get both. It just really depends on if the individual that is going to be conserved has assets or not. So if they have, real property, if they have bank accounts, if they have investment accounts, then you're going to have to get a conservatorship of the estate over that individual to access those accounts and provide for their care. Conservatorship of the person is naming somebody that can, make sure that they have food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and then also make medical decisions for them. So you can see if we had a healthcare directive and we had a financial power of attorney, we wouldn't have to, in most cases, have to get a conservatorship. So with the conservatorship of the estate, the conservator has to provide at least a yearly accounting to the court, which again is more filing fees, attorney's fees, and it can get very expensive. So we want to avoid that if we can. So if you do need to get a conservatorship over a loved one, this is the Legal Aid Society has a free conservatorship clinic. So they will not represent you as an attorney, but they will help you fill out all of the documents that are needed. So all of the petitions, all the judicial counsel forms and everything, they'll assist you with that. So this is a really great program for individuals that need to get a conservatorship over someone. I have their address on there. The courthouse is closed right now indefinitely. I don't know when they're going to be open, but there is a phone number there. So if anybody needs to call, there's that information. So now I'm going to switch over to estate planning for families with HD. So by families with HD, this is really geared more towards individuals that maybe don't have HD, but a loved one does, and they're potentially a caregiver for them. So special needs trusts are trusts that are created to benefit an individual that has a disability and that is receiving government assistance. So what the special need trust does is that it allows you to put assets into this trust, and you can use those assets to provide care for the disabled individual without disqualifying them from any of their government benefits. So this is really, really important when you're doing your estate planning, just to make sure that if you want to make sure that your loved one is cared for when you pass away, everything should be going to them in this special needs trust. So all of the assets would be controlled by a trustee. The individual that has HD or another disability does not have direct access to any of the funds. The money is just used to provide for their care. Let's see. So with the special needs trust, you have to be really, really careful what you use that money for. So it cannot go towards anything that the government would provide benefits for. So you cannot pay for housing, so you can't pay for rent or mortgage. You cannot pay for food. You cannot pay for utilities. So anything in the special needs trust is really going to be supplemental to those government benefits. So if you are thinking about setting up a special needs trust, I would absolutely recommend consulting with an attorney, just because this is a really complex area of law. And if you do not use the assets in the special needs trust properly, somebody can lose their benefits, which could end up causing a lot of harm to somebody. So this kind of is a little bit more about with supplemental security income. So SSI benefits can be reduced if an individual receiving SSI receives in-kind support and maintenance. So in-kind support and maintenance is, like I said previously, food or shelter that somebody else is providing for you. So if you're receiving government benefits and somebody else is paying for food or shelter for you, the government's going to look at that and say, well, we're going to count that money as income to this individual because they don't really need us to pay for their rent, their mortgage, their food, their utilities, because they have somebody else that's helping them out. So that's where you would maybe want to take a look and see what else that individual needs. So, maybe you pay for their cable bill, maybe you pay for extracurricular activities or healthcare, or something other than the things that the government is providing for. And that again is really important, just because we want to make sure that the individuals that have HD are able to get as much of the government benefits as possible. So there's a link down there as well if you want more information about this. That's where I got all of that information from. And finally, here's all my contact information. So my email, my office number. So if anybody has any questions or wants to talk to me about creating a healthcare directive or a trust or power of attorney, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know that you are with HDSA or this community, and I won't charge you guys for a consultation. So.
Thank you, Shannon.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You are just a wealth of information, and I really appreciate that you are, from an HD family first off, so you understand, the hardships that we go through, but also that you're from California, because from what you were saying, every state is so different. To have an expert on, locally what our family needs is really just invaluable.
Jamie?
So we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. If you want to unmute yourself.
So I had technical difficulties. The slides actually completely disappeared for me. I had a big thing in the middle of my screen that said Shannon is sharing her screen, but I got nothing. So if you, could you share your slides with me via email maybe?
Yes, yeah, I'm gonna write a note so I remember to email them to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if anybody else wants the slides, please let me know. I'm happy to send them.
Also, I want to say that I've personally used Shannon, and she's awesome, and I recommend her. And she's also donated to HDSA a couple of times, gift certificates for free estate planning. So she's an awesome person to have in our community.
Thanks, Mindy. That's very nice.
So, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So yes, thank you very much, Shannon. I've been concerned because a friend of mine has a disabled son, and they really had to go through some expensive legal maneuvering to get benefits for him, and she was telling me one time that they couldn't set up a trust for him from their funds because it might mess up all of the programs that he was enrolled in. So I've been concerned about that with Tim. And I think he's on SSD, which would be different from SSI. So I'm looking at that and saying, oh, well, I provide us food and housing and all of that. And I mean, I don't know if it's a problem or not.
So it's going to really depend, I think, on what kind of benefits. And he's on, so is it supplemental security disability or what?
He's on Social Security disability.
Disability. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not entirely sure how how you providing that for him would affect his benefits. Are you have they asked you, do they ask you for accounting or to provide any of that stuff? Okay. I mean, I think as long as it seems like with the supplemental security income, they have a lot more rules and they're a lot more strict about things. But honestly, I can do some research for you and find out, because that would be awful if he lost his benefits because you were helping him out. Yeah. I have had clients in the past with the supplemental security income where they had a disabled daughter that was living in their house, and because she was living in the house and not paying rent, they reduced her government benefits. So, but the thing with the SSI is that they only will reduce it by, I think it's $271 is the maximum amount that you can lose from that. So sometimes if you have a situation where the family has enough assets to provide good care for their loved one, it's worth it for them to take some of that money and provide them with extra care just to lose that small amount of benefits.
Yeah.
But with the disability, I'm not sure if if you could potentially lose the entire thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I can find out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I also have something else, Shannon. And this happened with my dad, and I'm not really sure why it happened, so maybe my mom can weigh in on it. But my dad was an organ donor his entire life. Like, he just really believed in donating blood, and he believed in donating organs because he was a highway patrolman, and he had seen a lot of crashes and people get critically injured. And he really wanted to donate his brain for Huntington's disease research. At the time that he passed, when we tried to call the number and make that happen, they basically said they couldn't take it because he was not mentally capable of making that decision, even though he had made the decision to do that early on. And so the question is when you find yourself in that situation, you want to do something giving like that, at what stage do we have to make that determination? And why is it not possible for the loved ones to donate after the person's passing?
So what kind of documentation did he have saying, did he have something signed and in writing saying that he wanted his brain to go to HD studies, or what did he have?
He just had it on his driver's license.
Oh, so just the
Yeah.
donor, the little pink donor.
Yeah, and the coroner's office called and said they were at the mortuary, they were going to remove his corneas because that's what was on his driver's license. And they said, had he suffered from dementia during the last 4 years of his life? Well, I had to say yes.
Right.
You know, he had Huntington's disease, and they said, well, that's the law, that if they've had dementia during the last 4 years of their life,
100%.
they can't harvest the organ.
Yeah, I have never heard of that law. Honestly, it seems like to me what they did was wrong. I know with my experience with my clients, if they have an advanced healthcare directive that is signed by the deceased individual, that's all that they usually need when they go to the mortuary to make that decision.
Yeah, well, he had that too, but he signed that like 2 years before he died. He had signed
Oh,
a
so
new
maybe
one.
they were saying it was invalid because it was
Yeah.
within that 4-year
Yeah.
period.
Frustrating because as a family, we knew our dad, and we knew that there's no question he would have wanted to do that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that seems wrong to me, because if Margaret was named as his agent to make healthcare decisions for him, that's the person that he named. And just because he had dementia within the last 4 years of his life doesn't mean that he lacked capacity to sign that healthcare directive. You can have dementia and have the capacity to sign those documents. So I think what they did was wrong, and I've never heard of a law like that before.
Yeah. Okay. I think the brain was a different thing.
Well, you had called Mom right after he passed to find out about donating it. And I think you talked to UCSD and they said no.
It was the hospice nurse that called the number for UCSD about the brain, and they said no.
You know, if I can interject, it's changed quite a bit, because I've been looking into that for my wife. And UCSD, you had to fill out a separate form prior to the death occurring. And then it wasn't really a guarantee that would go to Huntington's research. It was the Alzheimer's part of it that donated the brain. Now, there's a place in Massachusetts, and they've got some pretty strict requirements. Not only do you have to plan ahead of time and let them know, but within 12 hours, I believe it's 12 hours of the death occurring, they had to be contacted, and the brain has to be harvested within 24 hours. So they actually will pay. So I have it set up with a mortuary that will works in conjunction with the brain donor bank. And I have that information, and I'll pass it on to you, Mindy. It's on the Google Docs. I think I have it there. So we can talk more about that later.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say. I have a lot of clients that will do that during their lifetime. So, rather than just putting on the advanced healthcare directive that this is what you want, they'll actually contact UCSD or contact whatever organization it is ahead of time and make that arrangement, so that it's just there and their family doesn't have to go through what you guys went through.
Yeah, well, we were so inexperienced since, my dad was the first person diagnosed in our family, and we never had it in our family before. So I think, we just didn't know. But like, it's heartbreaking to know that your dad, his entire life was this person, wanted to do something good for science, and we just to be denied. It was just very sad,
It's heartbreaking.
Well, now, when you sign up to have the brain harvested, they actually want to know, you have to release all his medical information too, because they group the brains in regard to what the symptoms were, the predominant Huntington symptoms. And so they're trying to find out more by looking at the brain, why these particular symptoms are more prevalent. So it's really progressed.
Right. And I'll just comment that the reason for the time limits is really to make sure that the brains are in the best shape for future research. And so that's really the time limits. And so that a lot of information has been gathered over the past 20, 30 years in terms of how you need to harvest and how you need to preserve the brain. So that's a lot of what the procedures are centered around.
Shannon, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
So, with some of the families that we deal with in the beginning stages with Huntington's, the person affected isn't real cooperative and makes poor decisions with the finances. And it just seems like conservatorship is not really an option because of the expense, just getting the person to go to the court, and the year of documenting, so much can happen in that period of time. Would a legal separation be a better option? We've had some luck with families doing that in order to protect the spouse from being responsible for the person's debt that they're, quickly accumulating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that can be an option, but family law it can be very complicated, and splitting up the assets can be very complicated. And, if the person is already being kind of difficult, I don't know if that would be an easier situation. One thing that I would recommend would be if you created a trust and you had a trust account, you could maybe have somebody on there as a co-trustee with that individual. So, it wouldn't matter if, it wouldn't necessarily matter if it was a marriage or not, but let's say you had a family member that had HD, they were just kind of blowing all their money. You could see if they would set up a trust and maybe add you on as a co-trustee so that you can also manage those assets. And another thing that I've seen family members do is to kind of create a separate account that has a limited amount of money in it and only provide access to the individual with HD to that account. I've actually seen that with a lot of my clients that have, varying kinds of dementia, Alzheimer's or whatever it might be. But, they've had family members that have been really susceptible to people unduly influencing them, or, just wanting to spend all their money on magazine subscriptions or whatever it might be. So we just really kind of limited access to those accounts. And the way we've done that is by adding the co-trustee. And so that way the individual that has dementia or Huntington's disease doesn't feel like they're being completely kicked out of their finances. They still have the ability to manage a certain amount, but we just have another person on there really for checks and balances to make sure that everything isn't you know, completely depleted. Legal separation, though, I mean, I could see how that could be beneficial, just to make that spouse, you know, not liable for the other person's debts. But I don't know if it could do more harm than good, I think, in certain situations. So it's really going to depend on the individual person. Are there any other questions for me?
Real quick, power of attorney, durable power of attorney or financial power of attorney. Does that document have to be notarized?
It does. Yep, that document does need to be notarized. So right now, with you know, everything that's going on, there are mobile notaries that will come to people's houses, and I think the UPS stores are still open and may have notaries there. So that would probably be your best option for getting one of those documents done. Again, the power of attorney document, you can actually find that online as well, but there's just there's a lot of implications of that document that I think need to be explained by an attorney. So I would just be really careful signing a financial power of attorney before it's completely explained to you.
Shannon, do you have any comment on, and I think I know the answer to this, but when someone should start trying to pursue these things for a loved one and getting all this kind of arranged?
I mean, as soon as possible. I think, you know, with a progressive disease, you really can't wait that long. I think as soon as, you know, even if you're thinking about getting tested, I think it's good to get these documents done. I think that everybody should have them done as soon as possible, because even if it's not Huntington's disease, something else could happen. You know, you could get in a car accident and then your family's in this situation where they have to take care of you, and it's really, really difficult to do so. But, you know, with Huntington's disease, I think that it's just so important to get it done as soon as possible. Conservatorships are really, really difficult and just really taxing on families, and it's an important legal proceeding, but the court is taking away a lot of rights from the proposed conservatee, so they really want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. So they can be difficult to get sometimes. So I think that, you know, having your estate planning documents in place, especially if you're at risk for a disease like HD, it's just so important to do.
And how regularly do you need to go back and review those documents once you get them in place?
I tell my clients every probably 2 to 3 years to look over anything. Also, just, you know, be aware of any life events. So if there's, you know, somebody that passes away, if you have a child, or, you know, any like significant changes, if you purchase real property, something like that, you want to call your estate planning attorney and see if that's going to trigger a change. But, you know, for most individuals, if you have somebody in there as a successor trustee, we always put alternates on there. So you can have one person named, and then we can have 5 other alternates on there as backups just in case. So if we've got a lot of backups on there, then, you know, usually we won't have to make a whole lot of changes unless something crazy happens. So.
Are there any more questions for Shannon? All right. Well, thank you so much, Shannon. That was wonderful information. And I really appreciate you. The attorney stuff and all of that is very complicated. So again, we're very lucky to have you to help guide us through it.
Yeah, of course. If anybody has other questions or thinks of anything, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help with anything.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I believe that today's call or webinar was a success. Hopefully we'll be able to do more in the future. Your feedback is welcome. You know, I'm sure I'm just like everyone else, just trying to learn this new technology and new way of doing things. So there's always ways that we can improve. As well as if there are any speakers or topics you think that we should, you know, get speakers for to provide you with that information. We are all ears. But thank you for giving us a little bit of your time on your Saturday. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.